The following programming is sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Mark Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus forums, Mark connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Mark and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, America. How are you? I'm Mark Bernstein. This is Founders Forum, and we have a great show today. We actually have a couple of great shows lined up that we're doing today, and I'll introduce the people in the audience to you in a minute. Just thinking, though, about, well, let me introduce them now, actually. I have David and I have Arnie in the studio. I'll officially introduce them in a couple of minutes. But I've been thinking a lot about, there's a lot going on in the news. There's a lot of chaos, which was promised by our current administration in the United States. And right now it's about tariffs. I've mentioned this a couple times on the show. We don't get into politics, and we're not going to talk about the good or bad of any of that. But in the midst of this, I saw a quote from a friend of mine on Facebook this morning. And it's about authenticity. And it's a word that's occurred a lot to me in some of the personal development work that I do and things recently. So with that, I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that word and what it means to you. David, I'll start with you.
Well, it's interesting because it brings me back to authenticity, authentication, which is a big thing in security with internet today, because
you would have a different perspective.
Yeah. Even though one of the biggest things with anything in the internet is security, and it's overlooked so much. And you need to know how authentic things are. And that spreads through your entire business. So that's why
that's great. I love that. Arnie, any thoughts on it?
When I think of authenticity, I think of truth. And that's, for me, the bottom line.
That's great. So interesting, and I think we can get into that more when we do your show, actually. And this is what my friend Scott Merrill said. I don't have his authorization to talk about this, but since he put it publicly on Facebook, I don't think there's a problem with it. And he wrote about authenticity and said, with the rise of the internet, social media, and now AI, the most valued trait in a human being is authenticity. But the way he describes it, and I would agree with this, is authenticity isn't just being real or saying what's on your mind. It's a commitment to living in alignment with your highest values, principles, and purpose. It requires deep work, self-awareness, and the courage to share your genuine self with others. So it's a lot more than just like, oh yeah, I'm authentic. I say what's on my mind, because you hear that all the time, right? So I think there's a little more to it.
Yes.
Anyway, so now let me officially introduce our guest today, David Calderwood. He is Senior Digital Producer with Euro-Pacific Digital Media and founder, of course, of Euro-Pacific Digital Media, since we have founders on the show. And with over 30 years of experience as a director and producer specializing in digital media, e-commerce websites, search engine marketing, or SEM, ad campaign development, and live streaming video for corporate events, and still the occasional TV commercial. David is a Kiwi, meaning, if you didn't know this, grew up in New Zealand and started out in the television commercial markets working with major advertising agencies and Fortune 500 companies. After arriving in the U.S., he started Euro-Pacific Film and Video Productions, which focused more on providing video and visual marketing services to leading corporate organizations and national TV broadcasters, relying on his international experience and connections. David is currently a Florida resident, actually in Babcock Ranch, which we have discussed a bit on the show, as is our other in-person person today, Arnie Eastburn, and as am I on a snowbird basis. And he has a very active client base throughout the U.S. He's also a Google partner, an authorized partner and reseller with GoDaddy and Zoho. So welcome, David.
Well, thank you.
David, so to be an entrepreneur, there's all different ways people get there. And before I know your story, we're going to talk about how you got from working for companies to becoming an entrepreneur in the U.S. But I didn't ask you this, so I'm going to ask you this one. Is there anything in your family or background that would indicate that you had entrepreneurial leanings or tendencies?
Well, yes,
Okay.
a little bit. I've been working a lot on my family tree recently, going back, and that goes way, way, way back to like 950, but I won't go into that. But looking in, my great-grandfather had one of the very first photography businesses in the United Kingdom back in the 1850s when photography was just starting out.
Right.
So he was obviously an entrepreneur at the time.
Can you find some photos?
And, I've got lots of photographs that he had taken or a studio took. And, the studio was Hunter and Sons. So his sons obviously went into the business as well. So there's two generations right there. And then my grandfather, on the other side of the family, he owned about 3 or 4 stores also in the United Kingdom. And he had apothecaries, which is basically I won't say snake oil sales, but he sold all sorts of things that could fix all ailments. Today they call them pharmacies, but back then they were apothecaries. And I believe he had 3 or 4 of them, and very much an entrepreneur from that point of view. And I know a lot of the other stuff he had done over the years, which he was into the business world. And
so I threw you a curveball with that question.
Yeah.
And but it's interesting because usually we find that when we dig a little bit on this.
Actually, I'm also forgetting that my mother and father actually had shops as well.
Well, there you go.
Now I remember. My parents, when I was a baby, had a sort of a corner store with ice cream sales and stuff.
Ah.
They had that. And for many years, my mother owned and ran a business in Auckland for probably 20 years, which sold ponchos initially. My father bought, at an auction one day, bought up all these felt hats, the blocks that they make them on, the old bowler hats and top hats, from a company that had gone bankrupt, and started producing them, but they made them in all strange colors and started selling them through their shop. Sold tens of thousands of these things. And, so they were also entrepreneurs too.
Interesting. It actually reminds me of a story someone I had on a few months ago named Janet Bernstein, no relation, who I met, who's English. And her father had a candy store, and he died young. And the imprint that was left on her was she loved this candy store. And she said at that age, she wasn't really interested in sports. She wasn't really interested in anything else. She was interested in, I'm going to have my own business someday. And it didn't work out that way. She'd done other things along the way, and her life took all kinds of twists and curves. And then through family circumstances, she had to go to work, and she started an organizing company, which is probably the largest of its type. People getting ready to move primarily from their homes to other homes. And it's probably the largest one, and it's best of Philly and Philadelphia and that kind of thing. But it all traced back to her father's candy store, nickel and dime candy store in I guess it's pences and something else in England, but pences and pounds, pence and pounds or something like that. But anyway, so let's then talk about the journey. So tell me what you did prior to coming to America and prior to starting the business.
Yeah, so my initially I started working out for a television company, I guess is the best way to describe them. They're a film video production company in New Zealand. And I had been through an apprenticeship program at the local public television system, and I was offered a job there, but I got offered a better job at the private company, so I went there. And I was there for about 8 years and moved through. I had actually done a degree in marketing. So when I was working at this television company and I was working in production, at one stage the general manager came to me and said, "You have a degree in marketing. Why don't we have you working in sales and marketing?" And I said, I like production. And he says, I think you might be better in this. And he moved me over into that, and I became very successful and as one of their top sales and marketing people. And then I left that company and purchased I actually went to work as a freelancer with another company. And in between, I bought my first company, which was a crewing company called Film Crews. And what that did is it was a company where you could I had all these production people listed, and if you were making a feature film or something, you would call us up, and then we would book the crew and send them out for you. And so when I came to the US and I was looking for something to do, I already had clients in the US when I was in New Zealand. And one of my first calls I got was from SmithKline Beecham, which is the pharmaceutical company.
You already had your crews as well.
And I already had the international crews, and they needed to do a shoot in every SmithKline facility on the same day around the world. And I put that whole thing together, and it came off without any issues. And the big publication here wrote up an article about it, and the phone started ringing. And I had a production business working immediately.
Right. So when you bought your first company, that's when you became an entrepreneur.
Correct.
But when you had the need, that's when you became a founder of a company.
Yes.
Right? That's a good way.
Yeah, that was the first one I founded.
Right. So let's talk about why you came to America, because I've actually met the reason you came to America, and that's how I met you. So let's talk about that.
So I was on the board of the International Television Association at the time, and I used to come up for meetings about once a month. And at one of the conferences, I met this very pretty and intelligent film producer or television producer, and then we started dating internationally, and it came down to, well, we can't keep moving backwards and forwards between New Zealand and Australia and the US, so I said, well, come to the US. Let's see how that works out, and that's how I ended up here, and the rest is history.
Her name is Lisa, not to give away secrets, but that's how I met you. And tell me, because she's in the business, so you two have worked together. Why don't we talk about that for a minute, and then we'll take a quick break and talk about the development of this company.
Yeah, so Lisa was working for a company in New York as a producer. I was freelancing and running my crewing business and building that, and so I was working with a lot of networks, like Good Morning America was a big client of mine, and a lot of corporate companies like American Express and other companies like that. And moving into that whole corporate business, we eventually, it was a pretty successful business off right from the start. And Lisa was still working on her job, and then we moved to New Jersey, and we decided to have children, and she was commuting into the city every day from New Jersey, and one day she said, I can't do this anymore. It's like driving me up the wall. She was stuck in traffic for 5 hours. And I said, well, come and work with Euro Pacific. At that stage, I already had 2 or 3 people working for us. So she did, and we worked together in Euro Pacific for almost 18 years, and then she went back into another company. But
what a great business and love story. So with that, we're going to take a short break, and we'll see you all in a minute, again on Founders Forum.
Euro Pacific Digital Media delivers customized video, search engine optimization, and website hosting services, adapted to your organization's specific needs. We will create a successful cross-platform strategy, combining video, web design, social media, and digital marketing. Euro Pacific will craft relevant digital media content for your websites and social media campaigns, helping you to stand out in a cluttered marketplace. Our team of seasoned digital professionals will help take your organization to the next level and boost your digital presence. We offer 24/7 support on all of our fast and secure web hosting platforms, with web hosting packages available throughout the United States. Call 732-530-4451 or visit our website at euro-pacific.com. That's EURO-PACIFIC.com. Again, that's euro-pacific.com.
So we're back on Founders Forum with our guest today, David Calderwood, and we have Arnie Eastburn in the studio with us, who's going to be quiet. He's quietly observing. And we were just talking, David, about Lisa coming into the business. So what happened after that? You grew the business from there.
Yeah, so...
And I'm interested in also challenges you had along the way in growing it, because that's a common theme on the show and in entrepreneurialism in general.
Yeah, so one of the things with video production, for people who don't understand how it all works, it's very labor intensive. But it's also not where you need people all the time. You need people for a project. So that's, they come in for 2 weeks and they're working 20 hours a day and you're churning stuff out. And then you don't need them for 6 months. So it's not like you can go and hire people and just have them working there, because they sit around doing nothing. Now, we did hire certain people because we had edit facilities where we had contractual work that we were churning out, and we needed people for that. But if we went and were doing something for Good Morning America, for example, we went and did their what they call Sweeps Week show, which is where they get all the ratings. And it's a 1 week show and they do it somewhere exciting. We did one for them out of Europe. We had 45 crews working for us for 2 weeks. You're not hiring those people. They're all freelance. And using freelancers opens up, it's a whole nother thing, because you pay more for them, but you don't have to cover the costs of healthcare and all the other things. But you're still paying all your taxes, and it adds a lot of paperwork and liability insurance, believe it or not. But we did have, at one stage we were up to about 15 full-time employees on staff. But
a lot for that type of company.
It was, but we complemented that with with a lot of freelance staff as well. And I think on peak we probably, and also that was on our crewing side, the crewing business, that actually led to a few issues, because some of the crew that we used, who were all freelancers, and I mean we had over 1,000 people on the books, and some of those people would be working maybe 60% of the time for us, and that moves them into employee status, but they're not employees. So we were insisting that people had to be incorporated, had their own companies, and we were hiring their companies, not them, for these projects.
Right.
And we were very strict on that.
Smart.
And we actually sold off the crewing business a week before 9/11. And we had a very... Yeah, well, good and bad timing, because part of the deal included that we were going to get revenue share for 3 years. And that business sort of dried up for 3 years. But part of the reason we sold it was that the company who purchased it from us had a payroll company. And they were able to put all the freelancers into payroll, because our insurance company was really quite concerned about how many freelancers we were running, close to 1,000, right, without them being employees. And he said, they weren't sure whether they could cover the liability on that. So that sort of drove us to sell part of our company.
Interesting. So that was a challenge, and you came out of that challenge by working with freelancers, I understand, right?
Yeah. So to this day, we don't have any. We have two people, basically, myself and my wife. But other than that, we use freelancers, and because we work around project. It's on a per project basis. So if I need a graphic designer, I hire a graphic designer for that project, and that could be a month. It could be 3 months.
So you're in a creative business, and you work, obviously remotely, because there's a lot of technology involved in what you do today. What is your, we always ask, and you've chosen your 3-year vision. We always talk about what's your vision for the future. This is the kind of work you can do into your 90s and beyond if you wanted to. So what are your thoughts about that?
So yeah, I looked at that and I thought, 3-year vision. What am I going to do? And part of it is to narrow down on the physical stuff that I'm doing. So in a way, be more remote.
Right.
And
less in person.
Right.
Not having to lug equipment around and that kind of thing.
Yep. And also white labeling other people's services.
Gotcha.
And I've actually been doing quite a bit of that for the last few years.
So I have a lot of friends that are attorneys. I'm an attorney by background. It's interesting because everyone is figuring out how to do that in their own businesses. So as you get older, because they can still produce business, these guys are always in connections with people, but they don't necessarily want to keep putting on a tie and going to court to the extent people still do that and all that, and do the intense labor of it. So they farm it out to younger attorneys and things like that. And I see it in all different kinds of businesses going on. So it seems to be a trend for the future. Did want to ask you, how did you and Lisa end up in Florida from New Jersey? I'm going to ask you that question.
That was more just logistics. We'd sold our house in the Jersey Shore, and we actually rented. We were only going to rent for a couple of years while we looked around to find something. We just wanted to get out of New Jersey because of the tax rates and find somewhere with lower taxes.
Where were you at the Jersey Shore? I don't know if I ever asked.
We were in a place called Shrewsbury, which is near Red Bank.
Oh, near Red Bank.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And yeah, we sold the house, and then of course COVID hit, so we actually ended up renting for about 5 years, and that changed a lot of stuff. And we started looking during COVID actively, and we went to North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, kept going south, got to Florida, saw a lot of places we liked there. And we were going to look at Arizona, but we found a place in I was trying to find something that was not in a flood zone. Then we ended up where we are at Babcock Ranch, and we saw a whole bunch of houses that we really liked and started bidding on stuff.
So you're drawn to Babcock Ranch to avoid hurricanes to a certain extent.
Pretty much.
Which is our story as well, I think. Yeah. So we always ask some fun questions at the end, and I'm going to ask you the second one first because I'm intrigued as to why you picked this one. So I'm sure there's a story behind it. So what is your favorite song?
Well, it was interesting. I saw that question and I thought, oh, what is it? And I have so many favorite songs, and I really like albums. So, yeah, Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon.
It's funny because I just read something about it.
Yeah, but if I just had to do a song, it would be Bohemian Rhapsody. And there is a reason for that. One, I love the song when it came out. And
it's one of a kind, that's for
it was the first real video commercial or video music reel.
Music video?
Yep, that was the first music video ever.
It was?
Yes. I mean, that was designed to sell songs. Came out in 1974 or something.
Really, that long ago?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Because when I think of the first music video, it wasn't really the first music video. It's the first one that MTV played. Do you know what that was?
Video I do. Video Killed the Radio Star with the Police, was it? No, with Sting.
Forgotten the
Sting?
band. No.
The Buggles.
The Buggles.
That was
Roger saves the day.
Yeah. But that was not the first TV music show either. That was a copy of a New Zealand TV show called, I can't remember the name of it. MTV openly has it listed on their thing that it's based on the New Zealand television show. Yeah.
Well, they also say it was based on, they consulted with Michael Nesmith, formerly of the Monkees, who was a big music video guy, and he had a show called Elephant Parts, and they basically modeled it on that as the story I've always heard, according to, I think it was Sykes, I forget the guy who was the original creator of MTV, but I wouldn't be surprised.
No, he bought the rights from New Zealand, from Television New Zealand.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So speaking of Pink Floyd real quick, I just got to tell you, I read this morning a thing put out by David Gilmour saying that, Roger Waters walked off saying he was Pink Floyd. And he says, I object to that because I feel like I was a lot of Pink Floyd as well. And I think Richard Wright, maybe, I don't know if he died because he was talking about how important he was to Dark Side of the Moon, that album would have never been, there were several key songs that would have never happened if it weren't for Richard Wright. And the way he said it, he says, it was like walk in peace, my friend, or something like that. I don't know if he died or I don't know what happened with Richard Wright, but for some reason he just posted this and I just saw it. Anyway.
Died in 2008.
Oh, he died. He died in 2008?
Richard Wright.
Oh, I guess so. I don't know. Maybe it was on his birthday or something.
Yeah.
He posted it. Yeah, interesting. So I guess I didn't realize that. One question I wanted to go back to that I skipped was the challenges for your future vision. In other words, in terms of white labeling services and working more remote, what challenges do you see in terms of getting there?
You're competing with a lot of other people also white labeling similar services. We already white label a number of services where we're in the top 10 sellers. And you've got to get into those top groups. Once you get in there, you get a lot of other stuff from them, from whoever you're reselling. Because that's all you are. You're a reseller in a way.
Right.
But the nice thing about all the support services and that are moved away from me. I don't have to worry about that. It's just we find the clients, we sign them up, and they hopefully become long-term clients because we continue to receive income and revenue from that.
And it sounds like the challenge is, the competition, but it sounds like the way you overcome the challenge is making sure you're on the A-lists.
Yeah, and that's what you have to do. And so you got to focus only on one or two of those.
Gotcha.
And I have two at the moment, and I'm looking to start a third. And that's probably as many as I can handle.
Last question, your favorite book or books?
Pretty much any science fiction book. I'm a big science fiction reader, and a lot of...
Did you read as a kid?
Yeah.
Which ones did you like as a kid?
Time Machine.
Oh, Time Machine.
Yeah. Is that what it's called?
Famous
the
author.
person. I can blank on his name off the top of my head.
Not Jules Verne.
No.
The other guy.
Well, I read Jules Verne's too as a kid. But...
So did you have Tom Swift in New Zealand?
No.
There was a whole series of Tom Swift books about this guy that dreamt about becoming an astronaut and doing all these things. That was my favorite.
Well, so On the Beach, have you heard of that? It's one about the nuclear war at the end. That's actually required reading, or it used to be in New Zealand for high school kids.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
Because it made you realize that you live on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and if there really is a nuclear war, you may be the last people alive.
So on that positive note,
H.G. Wells, by the way.
H.G. Wells, thank you for that.
Right, of course. So, and what were his other big books? Since you have it up, Roger?
I don't have it up.
Because he had a couple of.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, big science.
That's my favorite one though.
H.G. Wells,
The Time Machine.
So for our listeners, go back and check out H.G. Wells again.
Yeah, H.G. Wells he's written so many books and they're all great.
Well, listen, I think we're out of time. So thanks so much, David, for being here. Great, interesting story. We thank you all for listening today to Founders Forum, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum and that you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WXKB 1039 HD2. Sponsored by Mark J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group.